We're going to kind of know the general time that he's coming back, just like his servants, they would be knowing the general time that their master is coming back. They would have calculated and said, okay, this is about the time that you're coming back, but he's not going to come back a decade after that. He wants to get back on a particular day, we would say. Here's how most of us who grew up in church, how we heard this taught. Typically it goes like this. The master goes away. He's gone away on a journey. And it could be months or years before he returns. We don't really know when. And it doesn't matter how long the master takes, but you have to be ready for whenever the master comes. But no one knows when the master is going to come. How many of you have ever heard something like that? 3 of us. Okay, so couple of observations on that. Now, keep in mind, this is being spoken to disciples 2,000 years ago in a very Middle Eastern culture, okay? So no internet, no US mail, no cell phones, so keep that in, and so just keep that in mind. Now, verse 38, again, he says, whether he comes in the second watch or in the third, and finds them so, blessed are those servants. So if it's the second watch or the third watch, and this is the part I think many of us grew up in and we miss, write this down. In our story, the servants apparently know the day, they just don't know the hour. They don't know the hour, but they know the day that he's going to come back. That's just in our story. So we would all agree they know the general time. So when it says if he comes in the second watch would be between 9 p.m. and midnight. Now, if he doesn't come in that watch, then he might come in the third watch, and that would be from midnight to about 3 a.m. So, about midnight to 3 a.m. So in our story, at least, they know the day that the master is coming back. I think many times we miss that little detail. So in our story, these servants, they would be friends of the master. They're all together, they work together. And so the master comes to his servants and says, look, I'm going to go away. And let's say he's going to a wedding, because many of your Bibles will say that. It could just be festival, but we'll stick with wedding. So I'm going to go to let's say my nephew's wedding, okay? And they would know where the master is going. So keep in mind that in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, if you were going to your relative's wedding, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have email, they didn't have the postal service. So your family was either in this village or it was in the next village over, maybe one village over. They didn't have communication as we understand it. They didn't have travel as we understand it. So families were very close-knit, and they were literally within a few miles of one another. So if he says, my nephew's getting married, and by the way, most people married somebody within their own village, so you would know exactly. But let's say this nephew or whoever's getting married is one village or 2 villages over. A village might be 2 miles down the road. Another village might be another 2. Your nephew, your relatives are probably not beyond that point. So your servants, they would begin to calculate, and they'd say, all right, well, if you're going to that village, we know where you're going. If it's 4 miles down the road, it's going to take you about an hour to get there. Now, if it's a wedding feast, it's other feasts, it might be a different time, but they all had certain times. But if we say it's a wedding feast, then they would know you're going to stay for the whole feast, and so you're going to be there for 7 days, and then you're going to come back from the feast. And so since it's about 4 miles away, it's going to take you about an hour, a little bit more than an hour to get back if you're there. So they would be able to calculate very closely when their master is going to be coming back. Again, this would be, not something on the other side of the country, because you'd have no idea if your nephew was getting married on the other side of the country, and your nephew probably wouldn't live there. So if they knew that, your nephew lives over here in this town, it's 4 miles away, and you're going to go there. It's going to take you about an hour to get there. A wedding feast is 7 days, and so you're going to be there at the end of 5 o'clock on that day. You're going to start making your way back. So they go, you might walk back, you're going to hurry back, and if you leave there about 5 o'clock, maybe to give you a little time, you probably get back in the second watch, 9 to midnight. But you also might get into a conversation with somebody on the way, catch up with somebody, and so you might not get back right at that second watch. It might be a little bit later on, maybe in the third watch, which would be after midnight, but before 3 a.m. But you notice that this master, it says the second watch or the third watch, the idea is he's not going to spend another night somewhere else. He wants to get back to his house, and they know that. So it's not that his masters or his servants have no earthly idea when the master is going to come back. They have a pretty good idea. They know where the wedding's taking place, if it's a wedding, how long it takes to get there. And that's why it says it's either the second watch, but if it's a little bit longer, maybe a few hours more, it's going to be in the third watch. So it's not going to be another decade. It's not going to be, they have a pretty good idea as to when he's coming back. Does that make sense to you, at least so far? Okay. So verse 39, it goes on, it says, but be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known what hour the thief was coming, he would not have allowed his house to be broken into. Again, it's not like if he'd known what decade his house was going to be broken into, it's what hour, it's a certain night, they kind of know that. Verse 40, so Jesus says, so you too be ready, for the Son of Man, underline that, is coming at an hour that you do not expect. So you just notice there, he doesn't say he's coming at a week or a decade, or century that you don't expect, but he's coming back at a somewhat of a specific time, and everybody would get there. In this case, at least in this story, it's going to be somewhere on a specific day. Now, verse 40, again, it says, so you two be ready, for the Son of Man, that's Jesus, is coming at an hour that you do not expect. So he says the Son of Man is coming. So we all get this, write this down. Jesus tells us that the parable is about him. This is about him. And Jesus says we won't know the hour. And so there you want to write down no date setting. We don't write down dates. We don't say it's going to be on this Tuesday. But it's interesting that word hour there means an hour. Hora is the Greek word hour, a time, a season. So we're going to kind of know the general time that he's coming back, just like his servants, they would be knowing the general time that their master is coming back. They would have calculated and said, okay, this is about the time that you're coming back. But he's not going to come back a decade after that. He wants to get back on a particular day, we would say. So they have a pretty good idea.